and welcome to Let's Talk About It. This is Taylor, your host, and welcome to the show. Today we are going to get into non-monogamy. We're going to talk about polyamory, and we're going to talk about solo polyamory. I'm very excited to introduce y'all to today's guest, and before we get started, just want to do a little check-in. So, how are you really doing? How are you feeling? Have you been taking care of yourself? Are you doing the best that you can? How are you practicing self-compassion? What experience of pleasure have you given yourself today? I hope you can take a second to sit with some of those questions and check in with yourself. And as always, come into listening to this podcast with open ears, an open heart, and an open mind. And we can do that best when we are taking care of ourselves. We do that best when we are showing up for ourselves so that we can then show up better for our community, to expand our minds, to connect with others. And hopefully you can feel a sense of connection listening to this podcast. As a brief check-in here for myself, I have not been doing my best. I have been I have been taking care of myself in the best way that I can, while also really not doing very well. As some of you know, there's a lot of things going on with the house, and I'll share more on that when I can. There are so many things happening, and I am working to remind myself every day that I'm doing the best that I can. I am only one person, and I've made all the decisions that I've made up until now with the information that I had at the time, and all I can do is move forward. So I hope that you are giving yourself some grace and allowing self-compassion, being kind to yourself. I am working very hard to be kind on myself these days, and I definitely didn't have a lot of spoons going into this interview, but I'm very happy that we still did it because we were able to have a really great conversation. And one of the things that I do super appreciate is, you know, a lot of the conversations that I want to have on Instagram aren't super accessible, or there just really isn't the space for it on there. So being able to actually have these conversations here on the podcast feel like a great way, and which is also the reason why I started the podcast in the first place, is so that I would have an outlet for this kind of stuff. And it just feels very energy giving. So I hope that you also feel a sense of rejuvenation of energy and groundedness, and feeling seen and feeling heard, challenging yourself a little bit as well. And with all of that, I want to introduce our lovely guest today, Gabrielle Smith. She is a sex and relationship writer, non-monogamy educator, and digital content creator. She looks at non-monogamy, mental health, LGBTQ+ topics, and sex positivity from an intersectional standpoint. And she's appeared as a non-monogamy expert on shows like Red Table Talk. So she's doing some things. Her work has also appeared in publications like Self, Men's Health, Shape, Insider, and several others. And you can also check out her resources at by Gabrielle Smith, BY, on Instagram. So I'm really excited to get into this. Again, open mind, open ears, open hearts, and let's talk about it. Right. So welcome, Gabrielle, to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Happy to always talk about non-monogamy.
Yes. That's honestly one of my favorite subjects, because it's a subject that elicits so much from other people. You just see the reactions immediately. Mm-hmm. And that's where I know this is where we should be going.
Yes. The first one was always, I could never do that. And I'm like, okay, great. Thank you for telling me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I am though. So
yes. Yeah. I always get the same thing with drinking as well, because I don't drink anything, and it's always, oh, I can never do that. And oh, good for you. And it's like, well, you can too. This is just a decision that I made. And similar with non-monogamy.
Very weird about sobriety too. The same way they're actually pretty weird about non-monogamy. I think when you do something different that's so normal, people feel like you're attacking them for their own choices.
Oh, yes. Yes. Perfectly said.
Yes. It's like, no.
Yeah.
I just did this myself.
Yeah. Well, I would love for you to share a little bit for people. Like, I think people are always confused. Like, how does one even get to this place? Because the default is monogamy. So I'm wondering if you can share a little bit of just kind of how you actually got to a place of being in non-monogamy and kind of unpacking monogamy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess first, always good to start with a definition. Non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy, whatever you want to call it, is just a relationship that is non-monogamous where, and there's a whole umbrella where you can simply be in an open relationship where you have sex with people outside of your relationship, but there's no romance, to having multiple romantic and sexual partners. I identify as polyamorous, which fits under that umbrella. But I've lived a like less conventional life. Like my parents are 20 years apart. My mom was a sex worker for a while. She was a dancer. My dad, I'm pretty sure, ran the strip club because I get a lot of different stories about it. So that was how they met. So I lived in, I wouldn't say a sex positive house, but a very like sex neutral home. Where like if I had a question, I would get an honest answer. My father never slut shamed me or anything. So I always like to say that about my background, because I think my family looks at sex a lot differently. But yeah, I just read a lot, especially online. And one time I was just reading fiction, and it was a vampire novel. And the main character was in a love triangle, and she kind of just told both guys to duke it out with their enemies, and whoever like killed the most won. And both guys killed the same amount of enemies. And she was like, "Oh, I'll have both." And I'm like, okay. So that sounds so much better than fighting over everything.
Yeah.
And then always knowing I was bisexual, I think there was always a, yes, I like men. Yes, I like women. Yes, I like everyone else too. So I never really restricted myself in that way. My first relationship was monogamous for, I want to say, 2 years. And it was like first love, all of that stuff. I was 17. And after a certain point, I like felt myself getting that itch for other people. I'd asked about an open relationship. My partner had said no, but when I was ready to break up, he said yes, which I would never call ethical, but it did work out for us for like another year and a half. And we ended up breaking up on pretty fair terms for other reasons. So then I just continued to pursue non-monogamy in multiple ways. My next partner, we began monogamous, and then we opened up towards the end of our relationship. And then the relationship fell apart for other reasons, because one of the things I always say is, don't open up your relationship if it's not solid.
Yeah. Non-monogamy is not a fix to your breaking monogamous relationship.
Yeah. Like people think, oh, it's like, I've heard therapists surprisingly advise like married couples who weren't doing well to have another child to become closer.
No. No.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yikes.
Bad therapists many, many years ago, but like...
Yeah. Well, and it's also because a lot of therapists aren't trained in sexuality, and so they also don't understand the different layers when it comes to monogamy, and there's a lot of shame built into that and a lot of stigma, and I think a lot of purity culture is built into marriage and family therapy that goes unchecked.
Yeah, this situation I was actually speaking about, like my sister's father. Apparently one of his ex-wives, they had suggested they have another child, and they still got divorced. I always think about things like that. And I always make these analogies because I think it's easier for people to understand the birth of it. But yeah, nothing's going to save your relationship but you, the two people inside of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit here to, you said that you are polyamorous, and that is a type of relationship within non-monogamy. And, I feel like I have walked through this before in past episodes, but would you mind unpacking a little bit what the different kinds of non-monogamy there are, and how come you decided to go with polyamory?
Yeah, so I look at it like a spectrum of sorts.
Yeah.
That usually is the easier way for people to understand it, where you start with very strict monogamy and then say what a lot of people are familiar with is swinging.
Yeah.
Where, couples will go to clubs or go to parties, and then they will share partners. And can you hear my cat trying to escape?
I heard a little meow, but I didn't know for sure if it was a meow or not, but I love it. Hi, kitty.
Okay. I'm like, should I let her out or...
If you want to let her out, you can. But if you want to keep her inside,
she will keep probably yelling until this is over.
I mean, hey, she knows what she wants, and she's not afraid to ask for it. So
truly,
I like that.
She is. Let me break the door. So give me 1 second. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. Okay, so she's all out. Oh no, she's in. We got her in. I see her.
She'll be quiet in like a second.
We are not against the cat meows on this podcast.
Yeah, I just didn't want her to continue to rip the door off. Sorry. Okay, so I'll just start with the explanation about that spectrum. So it's non-monogamy. I kind of look at it like a spectrum for a lot of people because that's the easiest way for people to process that. So you start with a very strict monogamous relationship. And then there's still a gray area there, but then a lot of people start with sex. So they'll go to swinging, which is kind of when couples go to parties or they meet other couples and they swap their partners. And that's kind of just something they do together. Then you can kind of go to an open relationship where people have sex outside their relationship, but maybe they don't have a romantic relationship with the people. They usually have like a lot of rules. Somewhere in between that, swinging and an open relationship is monogamish, which is like a gray arrangement where people allow their partners to have sex with other people in certain situations, like on vacation or if they're living in different cities, very specific arrangements. Then we usually get to polyamory at that point, which is having multiple relationships that are romantic and sexual or of whatever nature. There's a bit more freedom there. Sometimes we have polyfidelity, which is your triads or your quads, where 3 or 4 people are in a relationship all with each other or in some sort of like V situation. And that's in a closed circuit. So they have this relationship in a closed circuit. Then you get to non-monogamy. Then you get to polyamory, different forms of polyamory, which is hierarchical, where you have a primary partner, a secondary partner, and whatnot, where your primary partner is your main concern. Then you get to people like me who identify as solo polyamorous, where I am my own primary partner. And then far, far on the spectrum is relationship anarchy, where that boundary between, and this is a really, really like basic definition, but it's when that boundary between friendship and relationships, romantic relationships and sexual relationships is broken down and there are no expectations. It's kind of like every relationship in a person's life comes as it goes. So that is the main ones. And there are little different types of relationship structures. But honestly, I do try and suggest people don't really focus on those definitions and stuff, because really it's about creating the relationship structure that works for you. And some polyamorous relationships will look completely different than others because people have their rules, their boundaries, their little negotiations. And like that really makes things very different. Like my partner is married, and I'm friends with his wife, but we don't have sex. Her and I are in a romantic relationship. So we do what is called kitchen table polyamory, which is a form of polyamory where, you know, the idea is like you can sit around a kitchen table. So we hang out, we go on trips together, we do all that stuff. And the same thing with my metamor, and metamor is your partner's partner, my metamor's boyfriend. Like the four of us hang out a lot platonically. And then whereas other people do what's called parallel polyamory, which is where the relationships exist separately from each other, pretty much for the duration of the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many different kinds and so many different ways to do it. And ultimately, at least what I find when I work with people and in my own personal life, of just your monogamy or non-monogamy is up to you and your partner to negotiate, and partners to negotiate. So really anything that y'all are comfortable with and that you agree to and that brings you pleasure and that you like is how it can look. And that doesn't have to look any kind of specific way. Yeah,
I do peer support sessions because I do kind of coaching for non-monogamy. And a lot of people are like, I feel like I'm doing polyamory wrong. And I always try and tell them, you're not doing it wrong so long as you're communicating your needs. And what really makes me sad lately is that I feel like a lot of people feel like they should be on a certain timeline or they should be doing it a certain way. And I am trying to break down that barrier with a lot of people to show that, like, this isn't realistic. It's not a realistic expectation, especially in a pandemic. I think so many of us are completely different people than we were 1 year ago, 2 years ago. So that's something I'm really trying to like wrestle with for people. That's why I kind of do these affirmations lately. Be like, you're okay. Like, it's fine. Everybody's always like, I really needed this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to hear that too, because I think like even with monogamy, there's so much pressure of, in some ways, I don't think anybody's asking, am I doing it right? But then at the same time, I think almost everybody feels like they're doing it wrong and are feeling so pressured that it has to look a certain way. And you really just have to break down what those expectations and stereotypes are of what a relationship, quote unquote, should look like, unpack it, say, fuck it, feel centered, feel grounded, be affirmed in what it is you want and what brings you pleasure, and negotiate that with your partner. Because in actuality, a lot of people, I think, quote, do monogamy wrong because nobody's actually negotiating their monogamy. There's so many assumptions. And then you get into all kinds of tricky shit because, oh, well, you liked that girl's photo and I didn't like that. And that's like a form of you cheating on me. Well, I didn't think that was cheating. Well, we never discussed these things. We never discussed what our exclusivity actually looks like.
So many people have a completely different definition of cheating, to the point where, like, it's cheating if you watch porn. Or it's cheating if you watch amateur porn. I've always tried to tell people to like negotiate their relationship, because even when I was in monogamous relationships, I was always able to do things that I know most people wouldn't be allowed to. Like I was allowed to go out and flirt with strangers or like dance with strangers. You know, the boundary was usually don't take their number or like, you know, don't be too physical, but that was always totally fine in most of my relationships. But really what you described as those set of expectations is called the relationship escalator, which is essentially that relationships have this path that they're supposed to look like, where it's like, okay, we go on a date, we declare exclusivity after a certain amount of time, we move in together, we share a bank account, we get married, we have kids, we die. Like the thing about it is that there is no going back. And there is no option to create something different. So if we choose monogamy, it's important to choose it intentionally and really craft your relationships around that. Because even monogamous relationships get a lot of slack. Like just before this was on, like I was watching a show and it autoplayed to another one called Me, My I don't know, my partner and my ex. So people like having to cohabitate with their exes and their new partner. And like the reason that this is a show is because people are like, I could never, this is crazy. And yes, it's a cesspool for drama, like obviously, but you even see the scrutiny when say like a couple breaks up and they co-parent and they're friends still.
Yeah.
It's like, why would a new person would never let them come in, and like your next girlfriend, your next boyfriend won't allow that. And it's like, why? Like, why can't people be friends with their exes? Why can't people, you know, happily co-parent yet go on to have fulfilling monogamous relationships? A lot of people think that's completely unacceptable.
Because our expectations around monogamy are so strict, so strict. And I think a lot of this also comes from patriarchy too. Like it kind of gets to that like debate of like, can men and women just be friends? And the lack of trust there.
I think it's such a strange question to me, because I was a girl who grew up, like, I call myself a retired nerd. Because all my friends were nerds. I never wanted to have sex with them ever. And sure, like one of them caught feelings for me, but we actually our friendship did fizzle out because they couldn't handle it. But the rest of my friends, we have always been just friends and been just fine. And I think, so people are like, can men and women be friends? But really, I think this brings us to like a larger issue of, okay, inevitably people, if they are close together and they get along, they will have feelings for each other. That's why people also say like friends with benefits don't work.
Yeah.
But it's not feelings that are the problem. It's what you do with your feelings. And I think a lot of people have trouble maybe reflecting internally and thinking, okay, I have feelings for somebody, but that doesn't mean I need to pursue them.
Yeah.
I have feelings for somebody, but like maybe we should just talk about it and talk about our boundaries if we don't want to be in a relationship.
Oh, talking about your feelings to someone, if you don't know what their feelings are for you, that is a scary place to go. And majority of folks just avoid that shit.
Yeah, and then they make it weird.
Yeah, then things get super weird.
Yeah, that's what me and my partner call it, because when the bar is on the floor, unfortunately, for men, women who date cis men.
Yeah.
So, you know, he shows up, he's this nice guy, he's good looking, he treats them like a human. And routinely, he has dated a lot of women who, after a certain point, catch feelings and they can't handle the situation because he's married and they don't want to be polyamorous. So feelings get hurt. And he's very cognizant of that and has to keep a very strict set of boundaries. So in order to try and not hurt people, because it's something that happens again and again. And I mean, that's a whole nother thing where it's like, I don't date people who identify as monogamous because it's just historically never gone over well. But when you're like casually hooking up with people, it's kind of whatever.
Yeah.
Circling back around that, basically to just say that like him and I always speak about like feelings aren't the problem. It's just like, how do you manage your feelings? But I think especially for people in monogamous relationships, people who are taught to hold a lot of the really difficult and dark things inside of you, it's really hard to have those conversations or navigate those like situations. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I've ever, until following you, heard the term solo poly. And, you know, earlier you said that is essentially you are your own primary partner.
Yeah.
Can you unpack what that means a little bit? Because I would think, well, in every relationship, you would be your first priority.
Yeah.
So can you explain kind of how that's different maybe, or how you got to there?
Yeah. And I think that's true in any sort of relationship. I believe everyone should be their own priority, their own primary partner. But to kind of like go back to like when I decided to like pursue this quote unquote journey, basically my last relationship was really codependent. And I really lost myself in my partner. And I think he really lost himself in me. So when I moved to New York City, I'm originally from Queens, but I lived in Jersey for like 10 years. When I moved back to New York, I was like, I don't really want to date anybody. I don't want to do this, blah, 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 because I really want to figure out who I am. And that didn't work out. I met my current partner like a month in. But the fact that he was married and like we couldn't pursue that typical relationship escalator really gave me a lot of perspective, because I'm like, I have these emotional needs sated, and I get to develop my life on my own. And I realized I actually really, really love this space I'm in. Before I told myself, I need a primary partner. Like I need someone to put me first. But in putting myself first and extending that to not only like my emotional needs, but my financial needs, my living situation. The main reason I'm solo is simply for the fact that I want to remind myself every day to choose myself as opposed to someone else. Mm-hmm. And two, because even though in reality I would always take my partners into account, if I wanted to move to California tomorrow, I could. Mm-hmm. Like every decision I make is for myself, which sounds selfish, but it's really just prioritizing me and my heart with every moment of my day. Mm-hmm. And I don't really desire cohabitation like a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. I would have a nesting partner, but we would still have to have separate bedrooms. Mm-hmm. And I don't really desire merging finances and stuff like that. So it really is more of those logistical things. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes like the big difference than simply, I think, being partnered. I'm someone who chooses to present as single.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. How do you find that has been perceived when you are dating? How do people typically respond or engage to that?
Dating hasn't been an issue, but say like when I was on Red Table Talk, and all of that stuff, a lot of people perceive me as like, and we have to bring the racial dynamic into it as well. My partner is white, his wife is white. So people really treat me like I'm some like tragic mulatto, like a waif, like just waiting for my partner's wife to die so I can take her place, or, waiting for him to realize that he really wants to only be with me. Mm-hmm. And it's very frustrating because it like strips me of my autonomy.
Yeah.
Most recently somebody was like, oh, I hope you're in his will. And I'm like, I've been dating this man for 2 years. Why would I be in his will already?
Even if you were monogamous, like why would that
why would that happen? Not to mention, like, his business partner's getting most of, like, his stuff if he passes away. So, mostly that's what it is. One of the reasons I stopped dating people who identify as monogamous is because, especially when I date men, they think they can switch me or, like, save me. Very much like, you haven't found the right person. But I think internally for me, it's more difficult simply because one of the things I do desire is dating someone who is as equally single as me. Because most people in non-monogamous situations are partnered. They have like a primary or a nesting partner. So it is a little difficult just to, and it's like a minor complaint, just have to navigate around, okay, who's coming over, or like somebody else having to always take another person into account. Whereas I'm just like, have to communicate with my roommate.
Yeah. So would you almost consider this more of like I'm trying to, kind of conceptualize this on like a day-to-day. I'm in hearing what you're saying, I feel like it's almost kind of the place where like I've been at where I'm like having sexcations. And so I'm wondering if it's almost kind of like that dynamic, like when I'm having a sexcation with someone, like I'm single, they're single, we're like dating each other, but like he's not my responsibility. I'm not his responsibility. You know, we're not necessarily working towards something. Like, we are just enjoying each other's company, you know, growing our connection, having fun together, experiencing pleasure together. And there isn't really like an end goal per se. We're kind of living our individual lives and then coming together essentially to have a lot of sex together. Well, and I'm sure it sounds like it's more than, you know, just the sex. But that's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of kind of like a comparison to relate.
I think not entirely, because my one partner, his name is Alex. Like, Alex and I, we see each other as life partners, but it's going to look a lot different than his relationship with his wife. So our like long-term plans are to maybe like buy property together, but like we wouldn't live in the same unit, kind of something like that. So I still have my own space and I have like my needs served. But in terms of like long-term things, like, you know, I'm not going to see what's in his bank account. He's not going to see what's in mine. Like, my cats are my cats. Yeah. And his cat is his cat. So it's kind of those things. And some relationships I do have like that. Like, I have, you know, partners I see like once a month and we have this really lovely, intimate time, but like we're not really worried about each other. But it really is about like, I don't know. I look at each relationship individually. Yeah. So I take everything case by case, to the point where like some of my friendships I do see as platonic partnerships. I lived with a best friend for like 3 years, and we were so deeply in love with each other in like a familial way. Yeah. It was, I had a deep intimacy that was greater than a friendship. You know, like I would pay rent if she was short and it wouldn't be a conversation. Like, we would cook dinner for each other. Like, it's all the stuff you would do in a traditional relationship, except we weren't, you know, we weren't in love and we weren't having sex. We tried it, you know, and it didn't work out. So having had that experience, I think, before fully pursuing polyamory, also solidified my desire to be solo and single, because I think those partnerships are so much more intimate than like, well, one, they're so much, not more intimate, they're more stable. A romantic relationship can fall apart really easily, but a friendship is so much more safe to live with in a lot of ways. And like I said, I'm not against a partnership, but I think I always desire to be around people. I desire to just like be surrounded by love. But also I deeply desire control of my personhood. And it is a form of healing. I fully acknowledge that it comes from a bit of trauma, but like stuff I've seen at home, you know, my mom I lived with many abusive relationships, like emotionally. But I don't know. I just find that I'm really happier when I have the solid sense of personhood.
Yeah. Well, and to say children are home upstairs, so they are banging around and they will be screaming up there. But I think, you know, just processing that of like, you acknowledge that some of that might come from trauma. Like, I know where a lot of non-monogamy is often pathologized and stigmatized, and people thinking, oh, well, this comes out of, you know, trauma. They haven't found the right one yet, all those things. And I'm sorry, but like, what don't we do that is a result of some kind of trauma that we've had?
Yeah, 100%. Getting married and finding a relationship is, in a way, how so many people cope with abandonment. And like, people have families. Like, my mom, she gave birth to me because she wanted someone to genuinely love her for the first time in her life. So we do a lot of things as a response to trauma. I think my case and choosing solo polyamory is a little bit more unique in that respect. Although I do see a lot of people actively choose it as healing. And maybe, you know, one day I will have a primary partner. Who knows? But it's not going to be something I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But even, I don't know, can we talk about the history of marriage for a second?
Yeah. Let's go there.
That will contextualize this thing a lot. So marriage was initially conceived as a capitalist tactic. You know, we needed a man okay.
And patriarchal.
It's patriarchal and it's very capitalist and I laugh because it's so ridiculous sometimes. But basically marriage happened because a man wanted to make sure his things went to his kids. And the reason they could do that is because, okay, I give you this woman.
Yep.
She will have your kids and they will work on your farm. And when you both die, your things will go to your kids, not whoever else she's maybe been sleeping with, your kids. And monogamy was never really expected out of men.
No.
And we see that historically. It only began to be a kind of holistic expectation when the Catholic Church became really powerful because divorce was not allowed.
Yeah.
And that's why it has such a grip on us. And that's probably also why it's so puritanical. It's because, you know, and definitely not going to rip on anybody's faith, but like Catholicism can be very strict sometimes. So that's really why we're here. Like non-monogamy as a choice for me is also like a way to call back home because it was very common in indigenous communities and in African communities. And like, I'm someone who's Afro-Latina, and I have all of that in me. And it just has always felt more like safe in that respect.
I fuck with that real hard. Yeah. And you said that your partner is white. So can we get into that a little bit? Because I know you do discuss the different intersections around polyamory and mental health on your platform. And wondering if you can get into that a little bit here. I remember, like, most of my partners have been white males, and I think I'm fucking done. And
don't blame you.
And I remember watching a Red Table Talk probably 2 years ago with my white male partner, where Jada was basically saying, you know, she could never date a white man because she doesn't want to come home and have to explain herself. She wants someone that's going to understand her, and that the white man will never be able to understand. And so I find myself wrestling with that. And I'm wondering if from a, you know, solo poly perspective here, if you can kind of share your experience in terms of how, you know, those racial dynamics are at play, and just get into that a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am mixed race. Like my mom is, she wouldn't say it, but my mom's a white Latina and my dad is Black. I grew up in Jamaica, Queens. So for a while, I only knew Black people. My mom was really the only white person I knew. And then we moved to Long Island, and ever since then, I've been in predominantly white communities. Yeah. So I did face a lot of like internalized racism, you know. My mom definitely fed a lot into that, you know, you are prettier than the other girls, like all of those little things that, like those microaggressions, like going natural was a whole process.
Oh, yes.
So I say all that is to say I also have dated a lot of white men, and I've also like unpacked all of that. And I totally understand like that quote that you kind of bring back from Jada. But unless I am dating another queer Black woman who is coming from my socioeconomic level, who has, you know, sexually open parents, I'm always going to have to come home and explain something to my partner. Because I've dated Black men and Black women who were maybe misogynistic or homophobic, or they didn't believe in the same kind of social structure I believe in. So just, I don't know, my identity and my politics are just so specific that I'm always going to be wrestling with something.
Yeah.
My last partner, he was also white, but he understood so much more about social justice than me because he kind of worked in that. And, you know, my current partner understands less, and I do have to explain a lot more to him, and I have to throw some books at him. But the baseline of how he treats me compared to how, you know, my partner who knew more or some of the people of color I've dated have treated me is so much better. So sometimes I would always have to educate my partner on something is kind of what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like in some ways we change every day, and our partner should be getting to know us every day. And I do think that there are, you know, things around just the larger structures and system, and I call it the trifuckery of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism that we exist in, that, you know, not having to explain some of that stuff, is definitely like nice. Having someone that kind of gets what you would experience in the outside world. But I guess I'm wondering then how that shows up in the work that you do with folks who are, you know, exploring polyamory.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always honest. And like, I think I come from a trauma-informed lens when I do my coaching work, you know, and I come from like, I'm someone who has anxiety. I have depression. I have ADHD. So like I kind of work with people's mental illnesses and kind of try to come informed about them. But also like I show people these historical backings of why we are here, you know, and it helps contextualize and explain a lot of things. You know, I have a dream that one day I'll meet a beautiful Black bisexual mask person. But, you know, until that happens, I'm dating who I date. But in my work, I really just try to provide context. It's mostly it. Like, I'm like, here is the reading. Here's the material. A lot of my work is really just telling people they're not crazy.
Yeah. Yep. Same.
Yeah. Because some people use polyamory as a manipulation tactic as well.
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, I have seen a lot of people do polyamory in harmful ways where we're not discussing boundaries, where we're not discussing how or really taking into account people's feelings. You know, some people think you can't cheat in a polyamorous relationship, which is not true. Cheating
Major
is
misconception.
Like a violation of trust baseline. So I really have to talk to people a lot about that. You know, it's just like, well, we're polyamorous and my partner went to a play party and they had sex with somebody, even though they were supposed to disclose that they were going to have sex before. And now we have these issues surrounding it. I have a close friend who is currently going through a wild situation where her partner just decided to continue cheating on her, even though she proposed dating separately. Like they were non-monogamous and the whole time, but he was just constantly disloyal and dishonest because people still just want to do what they want to do. At the end of the day.
And that just really like floors me sometimes when like you have a situation where you're so open and honest with someone and so forgiving and allowing flexibility, and they still won't show up honest because they don't trust. Like
it's wild.
I've had to deal with this with past relationships where, you know, we had our negotiations and then they would go against that negotiation. And it's like, well, we already talked about that. I already told you I would be fine with it. You just needed to communicate it. And then you still decided to not communicate it because there was still that fear of, well, I don't know if I can trust it. She says it, but would she really be okay with it? And it's like, yes, that's why I said I would be okay.
Yes, or people don't want to deal with your reaction. I think another thing, at least personally, I struggle with is people seeing emotions as the end of the world, I guess.
Yeah. Like this major consequence, this thing they have to deal with now.
Where like if like for a lot of men, if a woman starts crying, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I have to fix this. No, you don't. Sometimes people just cry and like it just needs to be expressed. So I'll kind of share like an anecdote. In my previous relationship, we opened up and we were doing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which I never recommend for anyone who like loves themselves.
Why?
It makes you lie to your partner. So Don't Ask, Don't Tell is essentially a structure where you kind of pretend you're still in a monogamous relationship. You don't talk about the sex or the other relationships you're having.
See, I'm so nosy. I want to know everything. So it doesn't work for me. And I have such a big ass mouth. I talk about everything. So I'm like, I want to be able to come home and be like, oh my God, we did this. And this guy said this. And like, I want to talk about it.
I know. And I always did that. Even when I was in like, I don't know, like I was single and I was dating around, I'd be like, yeah, I'm seeing this guy. I'm seeing this guy. Yeah. Like they would all know about each other. Cause I'm like, first of all, I'm gonna let you know that I'm having sex with other people. So you can't think I'm not sexual health. And also just like, it's fun. But yeah, so my partner, I had a thing about being ignored. I still do. I don't like being ignored. And my anxiety was so bad and so untreated that he was afraid of dealing with it. So in the moment, I would kind of freak out and blow up his phone if I didn't hear from him. And I would text him and be like, if you're with a girl, that's fine. I just want to make sure you're not like purposely ignoring me. So he'd finally call me back and be like, oh, I'm just with my friends. Like nothing crazy is happening. And I'd be like, okay. And in the morning, he'd be like, actually, I was with somebody. And I'd be like, why are we lying? Why are we lying? What is the reason?
They're so scared. People are so scared, because when you are in a non-monogamous relationship, you are going against the defaults. You're going against the societal standards that we've all been conditioned under, and it can feel hard to trust. And especially with all of the stereotyping and assumptions put on specifically cis women who are in relationships, that we're just going to freak the fuck out. That we're going to like drag them and try to destroy their life and all this shit. And they're like, honestly, from my experience, I feel like they are so fucking scared to trust in polyamorous, non-monogamous relationships because they're just so anxious and scared.
I mean, it's like the saying, like you can't have your cake and eat it too, which has always been the strangest thing to me. Because like if I have a cake, I want to eat it.
Yeah, who gets a cake to not eat?
Yeah, so I'm
That's
like,
so
why
unfair.
did we do this? Like, who made that up? But you know, you can have your cake and eat it too. You just have to. Or the cost is communication. You know, negotiation, compromise, and just being transparent. Like, my partner and I share a calendar, so like I know when he's on a date. I know when I shouldn't be like calling him randomly on FaceTime when I've got my bonnet on. Yeah. Because like he's busy. He's not going to answer. The same thing with like, you know, sexual health. Like, I have 2 sexual partners right now. They know about each other. They honestly get tested so much that I don't have to. So, and it works out. So like, it's just the transparency aspect, I think, is really what people struggle with. And I don't know. I just read a lot of books. So
yeah. Well, you read a lot of books, but then you also like put it into practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is the big part.
There's a weird intersection of like literature or English majors and writers, overall creatives in non-monogamy. So I think it's just looking at the world differently and questioning a lot.
Definitely. One piece I want to make sure that we get to a little bit is you've talked about like intentionally dating, like setting intentionality in dating. And I think over the last year, everyone has been forced into practicing some of that because of COVID. How have you seen that kind of transition, how people date in terms of their intentionality?
I don't think people are being intentional, actually.
Oh, no?
Yeah, to me, it's very sad. I don't think anyone, I stopped dating actually on apps and stuff for a specific reason. And it's because I think nobody has processed their trauma.
True.
People don't really know that maybe they have less of a capacity for what they want to do. So we see that in like a lot of dates getting canceled, or, I'm personally currently in a space where I tell people I do not have the space for another partner. I do not want to fall in love, but like, I want to get to know the people I'm dating. I want to be friends. I want to enjoy my time with you. And I still get hit with, oh, I'm not looking for anything serious, so maybe we shouldn't do this. I'm like, okay. So I think people aren't being intentional yet because they're not being like intentional in their hearts and like learning. I think, especially with the state of the United States, trying to just pretend we can power through a pandemic.
Yeah.
We can't power through our feelings and our relationships. And I think the people who have like processed are really struggling. And those are the people who probably are still in therapy and stuff. But I really wish more people went into dating and they were like, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm open to. And this is what I actually have the bandwidth for.
Yeah.
But because people can't really answer those 3 questions, or they don't think about those 3 questions often, I see that people are just really running into the same issues and then people ghost and it fizzles out. And it's because people aren't communicating.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess in the sense that I was thinking of folks being more intentional now is in being, at least from what I've heard from people, it seems like people have either just stopped dating altogether or when they are stepping into dating, they are being incredibly specific and doing a lot more vetting of people before actually getting together. And I think that takes a different level of communication that a lot of people weren't doing beforehand. But I could also see the flip side of that, I haven't personally heard of or experienced, but where people are still just kind of reacting out of trauma and just trying to, find that safety in other people, which I don't always think is a bad thing because I think we are interdependent and we are in a collective trauma and it's okay to want company. But intentionally dating, I think, yes, takes a lot of unpacking. And I like those 3 questions that you brought up because I don't know that folks are being intentional in that way from the pandemic.
Yeah, it's like I think people were. If you were the same person you were before the pandemic, did you go to Mars? Did you go live on an island or something? Because it's impossible.
Yeah, I'm definitely not the same person I was before the pandemic.
I'm still learning all these things about me. I just started dating this girl and this is the first time I'm taking a relationship so slow. I keep doubting myself just because it's not the same. But I'm here acknowledging I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And because of that collective trauma, I think people, they just want to get through it. They just want life to go back to normal.
Yes.
And we're not normal anymore.
Shit wasn't normal to begin with.
It wasn't. I miss who I was. I miss being able to stay up until 4 a.m. and do all these things. I'm going to bed at 10 now and I gained weight and but
that's okay.
No, but I like this person better, I think is what I'm trying to say. And I think people maybe are not in that space yet where they like who they are, or they haven't figured out how this has changed them.
Well, it's so much, I think, of where we get into conflict or, dissatisfaction in our relationships is often because one or both or all parties are not coming to the table actually in an authentic, grounded place. And we are all just kind of smashing our faces on each other, putting body parts and other body parts and just going about shit with all these distractions. And unless you actually intentionally unpack that and show up in a really full place, I don't think you're going to really actually connect with someone on a real heart, soul, safe, consensual way, because I just don't see that like piecing together. And I think folks are like freaking the fuck out that their distractions were taken away from them. Mm-hmm. And now a lot of people, I think, have just kind of jumped straight back into those distractions. And that's where I'm just like, yeah, where are the folks who are like intentionally dating? Because
I don't know.
I'm trying to do that.
Yeah, that's why I've kind of stopped dating on apps and stuff, because I think that's just everybody's like mindlessly swiping. Mm-hmm. And I've just focused on, you know what? I'm going to build my friendships. I'm going to build my community. I'm going to like go to events and meet people. So I don't have to, you know, I think just, I'm very vulnerable. I think it's also where people struggle.
But people also like, yes, putting into your community. Yes. All of that. But also like, sexual intimacy, you know? Like, I mean, I know you have you do have 2 partners, but yeah, I don't know. I think that's a part that like people, I mean, I guess I'll just speak for myself. Like, yes, I'm working on a house. I'm working on building my career. You know, I'm putting into my community. Like, I'm nourishing my friendships, and I still want to be like hugged by like a bearded man at the end of the day who will then build me a fire and ravage me all night long and be a beautiful connection where I can also have like a sense of safety and comfort and like a moment of soothing through that connection and through that intimacy. Yeah.
I mean, that is something I would also love to have.
Yeah. You're like, that sounds great.
That sounds great. I mean, my boyfriend could probably do half of those things. Well, probably more. But like,
can he build a fire?
Yeah, he could build a fire. He can ravage me. He like doesn't really have a beard, but you know, he could grow one, and we don't love it though. But for me, I don't know. I used to be so happily and very slutty in my day-to-day life, and it's a lot harder for me to do that now. So like even the girl I'm seeing, it's like pretty new, and I'm struggling with like intimacy issues because that's the one thing I do put out. I say, I'm looking for intimate connections. But it can be friendships. It can be a casual relationship. It can be my life partner. And that's what I mean when I say like, I take relationships as they go or as they come. And like, everyone is case by case in that respect, because I can get that love from someone I decide is simply a friend. And we can also have that sexual intimacy and like understand that maybe our relationship is just platonic in the emotional sphere, or, you know, maybe we just don't have that depth for each other. But I don't know. Honestly, one of the things about choosing non-monogamy for the past few years is an immense freedom when it comes to my relationships. I value my friendships so much more because of it. And I value my relationships so much more because it doesn't have to be one thing at the same time. And I think we've been dancing around this, but kind of what monogamy does, and I try to be careful when I talk about the bad things about monogamy, because monogamy itself is not bad, but what is bad is compulsory monogamy, which is the fact that everyone has to be monogamous. There's no choice.
The default.
So what I think is really difficult to deal with is that, oh my God, I lost it. Basically,
brain fart.
Okay, here we go. Now I remember. What's difficult about compulsory monogamy, especially, is that we have to hide so much from our partners. Yeah. Because it is winner takes all, you know? Our relationships, we put all our eggs in one basket. So if you have attraction to somebody else, can't talk about it because your partner might get mad and leave you. If people stay in monogamous relationships for too long, in my opinion, often because they don't want to deal with the problem that might make them break up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we were given more options to deal with our issues, or if really it was easier for the world to come to terms with the fact that everything ends and we kind of like have to enjoy the journey.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Relationships would be far more enriching, because people are always like, what do you get out of this? What do you get out of dating a married man? And I'm like, well, I'm enjoying my time with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he loves me. I love him. We are building a life together in this very different way, but we still are. And I don't know if that's mostly it. Like, being unable to express attraction to other people, being unable to express like something that might make something upset, something that might end a relationship, and having to keep that in over and over and over again, I think that's really what hurts people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge part of it. You nailed it.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, of course. I could keep going on and on about this, but I definitely want to be mindful of your time here. So I found you on Instagram, but I would love for you to share where people can find you, how they can maybe book a session with you, how they can work with you, how they can, learn a little bit more about the stuff that you've shared today.
Yeah, so I'm actually doing monthly workshops on like what form of non-monogamy is good for people. The first one is this week. The next one is October 16th. And then, I usually release the dates 3 weeks before the session. But essentially it's just like, okay, what is non-monogamy? Where are you in your space? Here are some emotional considerations to make. And then there's a 30-minute Q&A, because I know people always have very specific questions.
Yeah.
But past that, my website is bygabriellesmith.com, by Gabrielle Smith. And that's where you can book a peer support session, where I kind of just provide information, insight, advice, to people who maybe don't have that in their life, because non-monogamy can be very isolating, because, if you're in a smaller community, people really aren't there for you. It's hard to understand, and the world is telling you you're wrong already. And then always on Instagram, by Gabrielle Smith is where I post resources, affirmations, a little bit of education. The next one is probably going to be on like kitchen table polyamory and how we can format our lives around it. But yeah, everything's on Instagram, and I post at least 3 times a week. I try. Lately, I've been promoting events, because I think it's really good for people to find like community. Yeah. Everybody's really lost, but that's basically it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for making it all the way through and keeping your ears, your hearts, and your minds open. It would mean so much to me if you could take a second or two after listening to this episode to leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you're enjoying about the show. I love reading, what your favorite episodes are, where you guys listen, and definitely feel free to share this with a friend. I mean, part of how we break down the stigmas around these topics is by talking about them, right? And sharing them with more people. So definitely share the podcast. And again, really wanting to include all of you in this podcast. So if you have questions or you want to share a thought or an experience, please send in a voice memo to ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I'm really excited to keep having these conversations and breaking down these stigmas. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.